And Robin, welcome to the Bobcat family here.
Thank you. I'm very happy that we're able to make this work. By the way, I've never been to a fireside chat where there's a fire. So I guess there was at one time. And you guys, this is a big place. Yeah, fine.
Well, and you ain't seen nothing.
Yeah.
You've got to walk around here. So I'm going to ask a few questions. We're going to give some quick answers, and we'll certainly open it up to everyone. First of all, how and why did you get into the airline industry?
That's a really good question. You know, I didn't take my first flight till I was 18 years old. So I definitely was a late developer to aviation, but I always sort of enjoyed looking at the planes coming over my house. So I studied engineering. I wasn't terribly good at that. So took a slight...
You did a master's degree.
Yeah, I wasn't very good at that either. But anyway, but took a slightly different direction and ended up working for another airline. And, you know, that was great.
Out of the gate.
Yeah, I spent a year actually working as an engineer in I guess, the defense business. And I kind of, you know, I wanted to, I mean, don't get me wrong, it's great work, but my personality is, you know, so a lot of these projects were like 10, 15, 20-year programs. And I kind of wanted to feel I was having a sort of a more, you know, prompt impact than that.
And were you deliberate about the airline industry, or you said, I just got to get out of this industry?
Well, actually, no, what happened was I got a summer job. I was obviously from the UK. I got a summer job working Logan Airport, selling duty free. And my job was to go down at the flights and you know, you've seen them in the jet bridges handing out bottles. I was doing that. And the British Airways crew, it was Terminal E at Logan. The British Airways crew were always super nice. And sometimes they'd make you a cup of tea. And, you know, for someone who was like 20 or something, and it was really nice to have a cup of tea. And so I thought they're really nice. I'd like to go work there. So I applied and got lucky.
And then you got to be CEO. Yeah. Let's get a snapshot of JetBlue in the context of US airlines.
Mm-hmm. Well, yes. Yeah, so, I mean, we were founded in the year 2000. So we're definitely one of the younger airlines.
And yet
we're a distant number 6, because the challenge in the US is you've got 4 large airlines that have about 20% of the market each, and the rest of us have 20% between us. And that's a result of a lot of consolidation that has been enabled and permitted over the years. And in my opinion, it's just not a sustainable path for the future. And so, you know, we have an answer to that, which is to acquire Spirit Airlines.
Yeah. We're going to get to the consolidation question in a minute. So when I look at my airline ticket, which can be vastly different depending on what time of day, what aircraft, how on earth do I understand what drives my airline ticket price? What are the drivers?
Well, I mean, it's really interesting because it's evolving. So historically, the way airlines have looked at that is they would look at what happened last year on a particular route, and they say, okay, I would expect to book 30 people today to this destination. And if they book 35, they would say, hey, demand is better than we thought, you know, would increase the fare. Or if it was only 25, they say, oh, wait a minute, things are a little bit slower than we would like, so we'll reduce the fare. And you know, obviously during holidays, they expect more demand than non-holidays. So that's the way it went. But now, of course, there's so many other ways to look at that demand. You know, with the great thing about the internet is we know now how many people are looking on our website at a particular destination on any day. So we don't just have to look at what happened historically, but we can look at what's happening now. So airlines are getting much more sophisticated at understanding that demand.
And what about exogenous variables like the price of fuel?
Well, you know, I think the way that, I mean, there isn't like, there are some airlines who have fuel surcharges. So they would say, you know, fuel goes up, we're just going to add something to the ticket. The way fuel really makes its way into pricing is that if, you know, fuel prices go up, you'll see airlines pull out flights, right? Because there's more flights that they won't be profitable flying. As they pull flights out, it reduces the amount of supply. And that obviously then can have an impact on on price, as we know. Fuel is the largest input cost an airline has, and so it's very material to the cost of the operation.
Isn't it interesting that exogenous variables like a war in the Middle East could well impact what JetBlue charges?
Yeah, I mean, historically, the price of fuel has been very connected to external events because, there's obviously concerns about supply shock. I mean, you go back to the 70s and the embargoes a lot of the Middle East countries had on providing fuel. I mean, what you have seen, though, recently is over the last 20 years or so is jet fuel is produced now by a much wider range of countries, including right here in the US, right? US is now a very significant producer of fuel. So it was, when news broke on Monday about the terrible events in Israel, the oil price did go up about 4%, but that's a lot less than you would have seen historically. So far, yeah, we'll see.
Speaking of fuel prices, I know you bought United Hydrogen recently, which is a source of hydrogen fuel. So I'm a big fan of electric cars.
Yeah.
Are we going to have electric
airplanes?
Are we going to have hydrogen fueled airplanes?
Yeah. So,
will that bring down the price?
It might. I think
for the environment.
There are tremendous physics involved in that industry that makes it very hard to decarbonize, right? Because you need a lot of thrust, a lot of power, you need really high power density fuels. And unfortunately, electric and some of these other fuels don't provide that. There is a role for electric airplanes in some of these shorter 9-10-seater airplanes, So we have a partnership with Cape Air. Who knows Cape Air? Up in the, yeah. So we have a partnership with them. They're very focused on the conversion to electric. Hydrogen is definitely possible. Airbus are doing a lot of work on that. But again, it will be for more the shorter flights. You're not going to fly transatlantic on a hydrogen airplane. And so really it's sustainable aviation fuel is where we're focused, which is effectively chemically the same as jet fuel, but made from more sustainable sources. The problem right now is it's very small. It's like 0.1% of what we're buying is, and it's not because we're not interested in buying it, the supply is not there. And we expect that supply to grow over time for sure.
Okay, so I'm not putting a free plug in for JetBlue, but I do notice.
Why not?
Yeah, right. I do notice that often when I shop for airline tickets, you are notably cheaper on some of.
That's right. Yes.
Yeah. So what is it that makes you cheaper within a business model that can make money? What is it that drives your lower cost?
Yeah, so what we say at JetBlue, and by the way, we're not perfect, but we want to be about great service and low fares. We want to offer customers the most legroom, free drinks and snacks, free Wi-Fi, free TV, but we also want that to come at a competitive fare. So how do we do that when we're offering all these things that other customers, other airlines don't offer in whole? We do that by being incredibly efficient. So our airplanes fly more hours per day than most of our competitors. We're very productive in terms of how we organize work and trips. We're transitioning a fleet type out, but when we're done, we're only going to have 2 fleet types. We're going to have 1 type of engine.
You have at the moment lighter planes because you have fewer seats.
Well, right now we have the Embraer 190, the A220, and we have the Airbus 320. We're going to simplify that down to the Airbus 220 and 320. And there's a lot of cost that goes with having lots of fleets. I have to have lots of different, I have to train pilots. I have to have more pilot bases. I've got more pilot training. I've got to have more maintenance training. I've got to carry more maintenance parts. So if you can simplify that down to fewer fleet types, it helps you keep your cost down. If you look at all the low-cost airlines around the world, whether that's Ryanair, EasyJet, Southwest, they're all defined by just having 1 type of airplane.
So you mentioned AI, artificial intelligence, and anticipatory information that you get about booking and so forth.
Yeah.
And the airlines have been pretty far ahead in using AI.
Yes.
But tell us where the future is and how AI is going to impact greater efficiency and effectiveness for?
No, I mean, we think it's got amazing opportunity. And honestly, I think we are just scratching the surface. If you think about like what we do every day, and I'm just talking JetBlue, and then you multiply that all the other lines, we basically fly 1,000 flights, right? We have to match airplanes every day with a particular flight. We have to, and some of those airplanes have defects, which means you can't fly them to certain places until they've been resolved. You've got to match crew, right? When we're thinking about pilots, pilots have different levels of experience, and there are rules around, you know, how much experience a pilot may have to fly a certain market. On top of that, I've got weather, I've got wind. A great example is that before a flight goes, about a couple of hours before, the dispatcher, who works in our operating arm, will basically agree with the pilot a plan of attack. You know, we're going to load this much fuel, we're going to fly on this path, we're going to fly at these heights, you know, et cetera, et cetera. But the weather doesn't stand still. And so if the weather moves around and it's more efficient to fly at 33,000 feet instead of 31,000 feet, or then, you know, there's no real-time update. So what AI is allowing us to do is to basically, one, predict those conditions better, but two, putting in the cockpit. We have, all of our pilots have got iPads, and we have Wi-Fi, bring them real-time weather updates and forecasts around, we think you should request this height, we think you should. So that's just one application. There are so many applications in our operations where AI can, you know, help us fly more efficiently.
You know, we're talking about driverless trucks.
Yes.
In terms of the transport. Are we going to be reducing the number of pilots needed in a cockpit?
I don't think so. I don't think so anytime too. I mean, I think that, you know, if you think about driverless cars, I honestly would have thought from all the hype 10 years ago, there'd be much more progress than there's been. Don't get me wrong, electric cars are great. I don't have one, but I want to get one at some point. And you know, the navigational tools are great, but it's really hard to compete with humans' ability to process that. So I think that until you've got people comfortable with the world of driverless cars, I don't think you can even begin to get people ready for getting on an airplane with one pilot or zero pilot. So I don't think it's happening anytime soon. You may see, you know, at some point certain types of cargo operation go down to one pilot with a, you know, second pilot on the ground. Maybe people get used to it by that. But, you know, I'm in my late 50s. And so I think I would have retired from this industry before we see airplanes with less than 2 pilots, if that ever happens.
So I want to transition a little bit to leadership. And leadership for you, for many people, was probably not more challenged ever than during the pandemic. Effectively, your industry was shut down. How did you, first of all, did you think deliberately about how you were going to try to lead during that period? I mean, you have a variety of stakeholders like your employees, your investors, your customers. How did you navigate what was not just a black swan event, but really a potentially fatal event for the airline?
No, I mean, honestly, no one was ready for that. I mean, we were literally saw in the space of 3 weeks a 98% reduction in our business. I mean, it was like not something you'd never seen. We were burning, you know, we had a good liquidity position. We had over $1 billion in the bank. We were burning $20 billion a day. We were going to go bankrupt in a couple of months. And by the way, some other airlines have gone bankrupt for us as well. So the first thing we had to do was to secure government support. And we were very fortunate. I give Doug Parker, who was at the time the CEO of American, all the credit, because he'd been through this. He was running US Airways during 9/11, and he was the only one of us in the US who had been through that. And he said, you know, we've got to get to Washington, and we've got to get in front.
You were, frankly, I think, the first industry.
We were the first industry, and the only industry really to get unique support. And there was a lot of other general support. But we worked across the aisle. I remember being down in Washington, and we arranged to get a meeting at the White House with Mike Pence. You know, because we wanted to pitch our case. And then on the way over, we heard the president was going to be there, Trump. And we're like, okay, It's got interesting. But I gotta say, they were great. And the Democrats, the Republicans were great. The Democrats were great. I think everyone realized, both from a business and an employee point of view, how important the airline. We drive 7% of the country's GDP, the aviation industry. And so we worked very well in a bipartisan way to get. So once we had that secured, we knew we had a path to survive. Because the biggest thing was we were doing these daily town hall meetings with our employees, virtually, obviously. And their number one fear was losing their job. And JetBlue, for 20 years of our existence, since we were first founded, had been able to keep a very unique promise that we'd never, ever made anyone redundant for economic reasons. And we wanted to keep that, no furlough commitment.
And were you able to?
We were able to do that. And still to this day, no one has been forced to leave JetBlue. Obviously, if you don't perform, you lose your job. Or you do something naughty, you lose your job. But no one has been asked to leave. We haven't furloughed anybody. And we were the only airline still, because there were times between government rounds of government support where the money stopped. And other airlines in the US did furlough. And we never did. And we're very proud of that, because we're there not just for our shareholders and our customers, but we want to be there for our people. And the culture of a company, we want our people to be proud of working for a company that really cares about them.
And this was such a unique event, and forced people to look at their business, look at their connections and networks differently. What did you learn and change as a result of COVID?
Well, I felt it was a little bit like, we were just all, there was the first 6 months where no one was flying, but then certain markets started to open up. So Florida was one of the first states to really open up. So all the airlines started flying to Florida. New York was actually one of the worst impacted markets, not just because of New York was very early in COVID, but also the Governor Cuomo at the time, he put in quarantine rules and they had the National Guard meeting everyone at the airport and saying, are you going to go on quarantine? So of course, everyone started flying to Newark instead, so they could land in Newark and then come across to New York without those. So we were, in that time, we were just trying to generate as much cash as we could. And then the big change for our industry, really, and it's been getting used to, is business travel. Business travel is not fully restored. It
may never be.
I don't think it's ever going to be, because I think companies learn how to do things differently. Organizations learn how to do things differently. If I'm working a deal, I can do 2 face-to-face meetings now and do 1 virtually. Companies internally have reduced travel. We're finding client-facing businesses are still traveling as much as they were, but business travel's down. And business travel was about 20% of our business, and it's 20% less than it was. And so that's 4 to 5% of our business. We've got to find ways of replacing.
And of course, you've been expanding into Europe.
Yes.
Which may be somewhat of an indirect result of that.
Yeah, I think,
Amsterdam, Paris, London.
London, Paris, Amsterdam, and more to follow. Now, I think that when our large markets in the Northeast are obviously New York and Boston, and markets like London, Paris, and Amsterdam were some of the largest places that people want to fly that we didn't fly. And we didn't have an airplane until recently that could do it, but we now have these long-range airplanes, and it's great, and it's going really well. And again, I remember business class fares to London being £8,000, 9,000 pounds, and I was looking the other day, a week out, and they're 2,000 return. And I think JetBlue deserves credit for that, because those airlines were not lowering fares before we turned up.
Yeah, and so when you think about, it was such a black crisis, a black swan event during the pandemic. Have you rebounded to pre-pandemic levels, even though the shift or the mix of travel has changed?
I think the volume is back. The challenge our industry has, and that we have, is that our costs have significantly increased. Labor costs are about 30% up on 2019. And you've seen that actually across a lot of sectors and fuel costs are about 40–50% up, and revenues are about 20% up. So what you've seen there is you've gone from a world where planes are full again. You've got, you're able to grow and things like that, but you're not driving the level of profitability that you need to be sustainable over time. So that's kind of that's the project now for the next year or two.
And there's been a shift in leisure travel more.
Yeah, we've definitely seen a shift. It is interesting though. So, I always felt, and I'm not right about much, but I was right about this. I always felt that things after a big shock, things eventually always go back to how they are, and a lot of futurists will say it's not true, and so business travel hasn't come back. That's true. But, when people working these 3-day a week in the offices or working from home, there was this sort of idea of blended leisure. I go to Miami for the weekend and I'll stay there 5 days instead of 3 days, and I'll work from Miami. We saw a little bit of that, but that's definitely coming back. Like you go a year ago, we definitely saw more people flying on a Thursday and a Tuesday. Now people are flying out Friday, back on Sunday, out Friday, back on Monday. So we're definitely seeing a return to historical patterns. I think the other thing we're seeing, as it's a generational thing, and it's not new, is that people want to spend more of their disposable income on experiences. Like both of my boys, both of my kids, or I've got 3 kids actually. Both of my kids. Why did I say that? I got 3. But my boys, they're both working now. They live in New York. They don't have a car. They have no interest in ever getting a car. Well, I remember saving up for the car. It was like my
They'll
first.
Get on a plane very quickly.
Oh, well, of course they do, because they get free flights when your dad works for JetBlue. Dad, you just work another 20 years there, please.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to ask a couple more questions and then head over to the audience. And of course, the question I have to ask is about consolidation in the airline industry, and then we'll get to that DOJ pesky problem.
Yeah.
So why consolidation? You alluded to that at the very beginning in the airline industry. You talked about the 80 and 20.
Yeah. Well, if we didn't want consolidation, the time to stop it was before you started permitting it. And I think what we have now, I mentioned earlier, imagine 4 large companies with about 20% each of the market. And when I say the market, I mean US domestic market. And then you've got the rest of us with 20% between us. And it's just not sustainable, because when you're one of these big airlines with 12, 13, 1,400 airplanes, you can afford to say, I don't like what that smaller airline is doing. I'm going to just take 20 airplanes and put them over there to make their life very difficult. And I'm not really going to notice it. And it's going to have a profound impact on them. So, I don't think you can kind of play the consolidation game to a point in time where you say, we don't like it anymore, we're not stop it. Because all you're doing is strengthening the hand of the large 4 airlines. So, I view some form of consolidation amongst the smaller airlines as something that really is going to be important for their continued success.
So let's just, and for those of you who are unaware, JetBlue is trying to acquire Spirit Airlines, which is the largest low-cost airline, for $3.8 billion. The Department of Justice is not happy about that and is suing to block that merger. And you're obviously arguing that it's a good thing.
Yeah.
So talk about the DOJ argument versus yours. How do you rebut that?
No, I think it's no secret that this administration, is taking a very hostile approach to mergers. And by the way, I'm not arguing with that per se. I think, there's probably a lot of mergers that aren't really in the consumer's interest. But, I think, I think in our case, we have a very strong pro-consumer argument, and it's based on these few things. First of all, whether JetBlue and Spirit merge or not, 80% of people are still going to be flying on one of the big 4 airlines. And so what is proven is something called the JetBlue effect. And this was something that was a phrase that was coined by MIT over 10 years ago. And we pressure tested this and we've updated it to make sure it's still current. And what it says is when JetBlue starts flying against a legacy airline, because our product is competitive, you know, and people like taking JetBlue. They bring their prices down across the board, and they bring their prices down by a lot more than when an ultra low cost carrier flies them, because in that case, the ultra low cost carrier is not necessarily competing for all of that business. You know, they may not even match them at all. They may just match them slightly. So the argument is that people, every time you take a Spirit airplane off and put it into the JetBlue product, that
For seats, higher prices.
more people will benefit, because all the fares are going to come down on the legacy airlines.
That's your argument.
Yes.
The DOJ's argument is fewer seats,
Yeah.
higher prices, because the low of easy
Correct.
of Spirit will go away.
Well, yeah, that's their argument. You know, we
That's
obviously
your
don't
argument.
agree with that, because, you know, I think that, you know, Spirit, if Spirit fly an Airbus 320 today, let's say they have 180 seats on it, we fly 321s with 200 seats on. I can increase the number of seats on that route and give people a better experience. The other thing is
At
that—
what price?
well, I mean, whatever price you need to, you know, I mean, pricing is very dynamic, right? I mean, if JetBlue and if you're on a route today and you've got a JetBlue flight and a Spirit flight, and we replace that with 3 JetBlue flights, fare is going to come down because you've got more seats to fill. So, you know, my point on pricing is the industry, but JetBlue and Spirit together are only 8%. You know, pricing is really something that the large four airlines control the most of.
And after the consolidation,
Yeah.
you will be the 5th largest airline?
We'll be the 5th largest at 8%.
Of it.
And I think the other point I want to make on what we've offered the Department of Justice, which they've always accepted before, is the biggest divestiture package ever offered in any airline merger, where we're basically saying at LaGuardia, at Boston, at Newark, and at Fort Lauderdale, which are the only airports really that a new entrant can't get into. We're going to take all of Spirit's assets. We've already done deals with other ultra-low-cost carriers. So at LaGuardia, for example, yes, Spirit will disappear, but they're going to be replaced by Frontier, who do the same thing. So, and in any other airports, they're not congested. So, airlines move in and out the whole time. But more importantly, the industry has to be sustainable, right? I mean, JetBlue has said we're going to lose money this quarter. Spirit has said it's going to lose money this quarter. A lot of these large legacy airlines are going to make money. So at the end of the day, you've got to, if you don't have a viable, sustainable business, and so by bringing JetBlue and Spirit together, you know, not only do we believe we're going to have a much better impact on the consumer, we create a platform for both airlines to be much more successful than they can be individually. And by the way, I think you have to draw a line at somewhere. You know, I think we can all jam more seats on an airplane. You know, we can all take more things away from people, but you kind of got to draw a line and say, you know, enough's enough. There's a certain amount that people should be expecting to get.
And your hearing before the judge is what, in a couple of weeks? I think it was delayed by 1 week.
Yeah, it was actually due to start next week,
Yeah,
and he has a trial he's got to do.
How do you feel about it?
I'm feeling confident. Yeah, of course.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, we wouldn't have gone into this if we didn't feel
That
you know, we had a good case.
Okay, your turn, please. Here we have questions. Microphones. Well, in the front row, just introduce yourself and ask the question and project.
My name's Max, and talking earlier about fees and how those are an integral part of revenue generation for airlines, and how JetBlue prides itself on offering amenities at lower fee rates. But my question is, how does JetBlue, find the equilibrium to be able to offer these amenities at an affordable fee structure while also retaining their customer base without the
Yeah, that's a great question. So the question really was, what I mean, if I can rephrase it, what do you kind of bundle into the fare versus what do you say to people, you can pay more for, and I think, what we say at JetBlue is like, we want to, according to our customer research, the things people most value are the legroom, the in-flight entertainment and Wi-Fi, and the service, so the drinks and the snacks. So yeah, we'll charge for baggage fees and other things. But for those three things, we think these things should be free, and we think that they should be included in the fare. So, even our sort of discounted economy coach fares, people get access to the free live TV and the free Wi-Fi. Everyone gets access to a humane amount of legroom. And this is the irony of we had another trial actually last year where the DOJ praised JetBlue and the positive effect we had on competition and lowering fares. And they now want to take a very different position a year later. So, look, I'm going to sound a little bit arrogant, but I'm not. Well, that's not what just Robin thinks. Others have said this, but I think the reason some of our competitors, I think have free TV is because we started it. I think the reason now other airlines are trying to make Wi-Fi free is because we've had free Wi-Fi for 10 years. I think the reason airlines have started adding some snacks back in to coach as opposed to just taking it away because we've had them for 20 years. And so I do believe that we are singly responsible, as small as we are, in raising the bar on what people get. And we're going to continue to do that.
I have to say, I recently flew a cut rate airline, which I'm not going to mention, and they separated the cost of the seat from the cost of the flight. And I found that rather hard to understand because I was buying a seat because of the flight.
Yeah.
How do you separate the two? But they did.
Yeah.
Okay, we had a question over here. Thank you. Wait for the microphone, Sarah. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Sarah Doucet, and I'm currently an MBA candidate. I just want to say thank you so much for being here. I know you reflected a little bit upon how you navigated the COVID-19 pandemic within the airline industry. But my question is, how did you stay intrinsically motivated during the devastating impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on the airline industry? And how did you keep your employees motivated during these uncertain times?
So your own resilience and then also the motivation for the rest.
Yeah, I think you kind of look back now and you can breathe a sigh of relief because it all kind of worked out in the end. But you didn't know that. I mean, I remember the TV, there's all these there was these variants are going to get worse. And, is anyone ever going to want to fly again? And that's hard. So, I think that I knew that we had to keep people in our company positive because, a lot of them had made sort of multi-generational decisions to stay in the airline industry. Their father or the mother was in the industry, and it's kind of all they had. And it was incredibly important to us. And I said to my team, we really only have two objectives at this point. One is to protect the financial security of JetBlue, and two, to take care of the financial security of our people, so they don't have to worry about whether they're going to be able to put, food on the table and other things. So that gives you an incredible level of motivation. And I'd say the support we got from the government was instrumental in us being able to do that. And as frustrating as it's been for people in the post-COVID world to fly, in terms of some of the challenges there were last year, particularly, it would be so much worse if we didn't have that support, because most US airlines would have gone bankrupt or be much smaller than they are today. And I did get to meet, one of the other fun things was that day we had the meeting in the White House with the president to talk about support for the industry. Kim Kardashian was in the White House that day. So I got to meet Kim Kardashian, which my daughter was very proud of me for even knowing who she was. Of course I knew who she was.
We do have an online question as well. A question from an online participant. As an investor in your company, how much do you think the merger with Spirit will impact profitability?
Yeah, so no, I think we're very excited about the opportunity for the Spirit deal and the sort of the synergies it's going to allow us to provide. I mean, about 50% of an airline's cost structure is fixed and about 50% is variable. And one of the disadvantages of being much smaller is that you've still got, you've got a fixed cost structure that you don't have as much capacity to allocate over. And, it costs us both the same to run a website and do many other things. So, I think there are a lot of benefits in that from a cost perspective, but also from a revenue perspective. If you look at most airline mergers, you look at the synergies, they tend to be about 70% revenue, 30% cost. But the ability to offer bigger networks for customers, to have more frequent flyers in our program, so we can be more competitive with the big airlines. The ability to sell them more vacations, the ability to get the credit card. I mean, if you don't know this, the reason airlines push credit cards so hard is that they really make up the majority of the profits of a lot of airlines. And so, obviously, you're always, when people are choosing what airline credit card they're looking at, so, well, which credit card is going to give me the best places to go? And so, obviously, you're in a natural disadvantage to the larger airlines in having that. So again, the merger is going to allow us to accelerate that and do things probably 15, 20 years more quickly than we can do if we just did it organically.
So any of you who have flown recently, the last 10 minutes of the flight is no matter what the airline is somebody telling you how great your life will be if you pick up this airline credit card. Because, I mean, I've seen one of the earnings of one of the biggest airlines, they make more money off that than the flights.
Oh yeah, I mean, definitely. I mean, it is like airlines would still be profitable without the credit, but only just. It would be a game changer. And there's a bill at the moment, the Marshall-Durbin bill, which, if passed, would really remove these benefits from the people with the credit cards and push them into the hands of the large retailers. And the argument saying, and so I think that people love their airline miles. We all are moaning about airlines, but we always love booking our trips using their points on the credit card. And I think it's important that people can still keep those benefits.
Okay, back there.
Yeah.
And let's do quick questions so that we can get to a couple more, because I know you want to get out at 2:50 for your next classes.
So I will keep this very brief, but kind of just what you were talking about. I recently flew on Sunday. I won't name the airline, but I saw a maple leaf out the window the whole time. And one of the things that really caught my attention was they, had the video of all everybody does the creative videos of how to, be safe. And then it was followed with 5 different commercials of their corporate partners that you had to watch on your seat back. Mm-hmm. Is that the kind of thing, I mean, tying into that is that, I'm just curious, like what your thoughts are in kind of, the nickel and diming of finding all these creative ways mm-hmm. to not be too intrusive, mm-hmm. but still find little pieces to create revenue.
Yeah, that's a lot, 5 ads. I mean, those, by the way, in the industry term for those things are called roadblocks, because you can't get past it. You got to watch it. But yeah, it's a balance, right? I mean, if you go on our Wi-Fi and you want to get free Wi-Fi, you kind of have to watch a 30-second commercial. But I think you've got to balance that against kind of just really annoying people. But yeah, I mean, those things matter, but the credit card, I mean, for airlines, the credit card is a very, very significant. I mean, this year will be, let's say these are round numbers, but let's say we end up with about $10 billion of revenue. The credit card is going to be about $1 billion of that. And we are
smaller than most airlines.
Which is smaller than most as a percentage. So, you can see these are really important. So that's why they always make the credit card. Make the credit card.
And yeah, a couple more quick questions, and there's one more back there in the middle row.
Hi, I'm Saliba Kaoud. We had talked a little earlier. As a kid, I'd always fly JetBlue with my family, and it became a core memory for me. I'd always put on a nice movie, get a little snack, get a little drink, and it was really a good experience for me. So does JetBlue have a certain demographic that's prominent among the people that fly on your airplanes? And how can you expand it to maybe ones that aren't as prominent on your airplanes?
Yeah, I think the thing about flying is because there's so few airlines to fly because of all the consolidation that happened, everyone flies everybody. And, I think that we definitely over-index on families and younger people because of the TVs. But now Wi-Fi is on airplanes. People bring their own entertainment, and so I think it's evolving. And even the big legacy airlines that sort of put themselves down as more business airlines, the vast majority of what they fly are actually people going on vacation. So.
Last quick question.
Thank you. From your bird's eye view, literally as CEO, what's your greatest consumer tip for travelers? Is there anything that you're like, why are they so dumb? Why aren't they doing this or making this? Or what's your biggest consumer tip takeaway for folks?
How to write a complaint letter. So, when you're the CEO, you get a lot of complaints, and that's fine. It goes with the territory.
I can attest to that.
And most people don't know how to write a complaint letter. If you want something done because you're unhappy and you want to get it in front of busy people, first make it really short. People write long letters because they think if they add another thing, but actually you're only as strong as your strongest argument. So keep it short. Secondly, don't write something like, I'm never going to fly you again. Like, if you're not going to fly me again, why am I going to spend any time helping you? What I want you to say is, look, you really disappointed me on this occasion. I'm willing to give you another go, but I want you to make this right for me. That's my best tip on that I see. I'm really good at writing complaint letters now to other people because
yeah, keep the main thing and keep it short.
Yeah.
So this is one other question in the realm of tips. Yeah. If you go back to your first job or when you graduated from University of Bath, it was University of Bath in England, what did you do right then that positioned you for this ultimate career track? And what should you have done that you didn't do? And of course, this is relevant to this audience.
Yeah, well, I think most things I didn't do actually were right. I kind of, my whole process in my life is kind of do things I really like doing and, just keep doing that. And so I started, as I said, selling duty free. I then got a job, checking people in at the airport. And I loved doing all of that. I love being with people. I love the smell of the jet fuel. I love the operations. And so what I decided to do is just keep trying different jobs and working my way around and build my knowledge of the airline, because I knew I wanted to stay in aviation. And, of course, you get opportunities over time to look at different careers and different opportunities. And believe me, sometimes I look back and say, why didn't I take that? It's been a very challenging time, but I wouldn't swap it for anything. So follow your passion, be curious, and spend time really getting to know, how your industry works.
Yeah, we had another CEO here on Friday, talked about being authentic to yourself, which is very much along the lines of what you said. Well, I want to thank you. You brought us into a whole new industry that we use as consumers, but we don't fly planes.
Yes.
And so thank you very much.